Hello and welcome to One Decision in Brief. I'm Christina Ruffini, joined today by my co-host, Sir Richard Dearlove. Sir Richard, how are you? Where are you? Are you in
my
the
house in
Cotswolds?
Cornwall. Yes, don't worry. I'm in my little cottage in Cornwall. It's a very beautiful early winter's day, and it's a great place to be. I love being here.
Oh, how lovely. I'm staring at a dumpster across the street from my apartment in D.C. But, on we go. We wanted to take this opportunity to kind of dig into an interesting character on the global scene, and that is Syria's new president, Ahmed Al-Shura, or as he was known previously, Abu Mohammed Al-Jalani. He spent years as an al-Qaeda fighter in Iraq. He was actually in prison in Abu Ghraib, that infamous U.S. prison. He founded Syria's al-Nusra Front, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate, and he did all this before kind of overthrowing Assad in December 2024. I mean, I happened to be anchoring live coverage on a network that day, and this happened so quickly. When we came up with our show plan Friday night, Syria was nowhere on the radar, and then by 1 p.m. the next day, the President Biden, because it was still Biden then, was walking into the Roosevelt Room to give a statement on the fact that the Assad government had fallen. So what is your impression of this guy, how he came to power, how all this happened? And I don't know, do you think he's going to last?
Well, I think the main point to make is the ethnic complexity of the mix in Syria and the fact that ruling Syria is not straightforward. But I think his emergence as leader has got pretty deep roots. And I think his conversion from being a terrorist to being a politician, and there are plenty of precedents for that, has happened over a relatively long period. I mean, he gained power clearly because he was backed by the Turks. And the Turks put a huge amount of time and money into making sure that he would be the dominant dissident leader when it came to overthrowing Bashar's regime. What's just been publicized in the UK, which is really fascinating, is that we've just changed heads of the intelligence service. So my former job, chief of MI6, and the previous head who's just retired was called Sir Richard Moore, and he had been ambassador in Turkey, speaks fluent Turkish, and had a good relationship with Erdogan. It's just come out in the press, and this is rather surprising, that he clearly had been talking to this new Syrian leader for at least a year before the guy emerged. So I've got a feeling that there was a sort of process of conversion and grooming in which the US must have been involved, in which the UK was certainly involved. And the contacts in a case like that are definitely going to be handled by the intelligence community because the man has no official diplomatic status. And, you've still got a relationship with Bashar in Syria. But on the other hand, they obviously were talking in parallel to this guy a long way before he took power. So I think that, we're surprised by what happened, but the runes, if you read them properly, tell me that he was picked out as a possible leader much, much earlier on. And if the Turks would have been promoting him as an interlocutor.
I covered the Syrian war at the start of it. I mean, I was in Lebanon on the border talking to refugees. We actually went up to the border. I was dying to cross. I didn't have a permit. And my fixer at the time said, well, I can get you across. And I said, great. And he said, so if you just get in the trunk of this car. And I've just covered way too many stories that start with, so they got in the trunk of the car and then you never saw them again. So I never got to go over. But I mean, even I had never heard of this guy before he was president, right? So that's very interesting and does make a little more sense because to a lot of us, he came out of nowhere, but he can't have really come out of nowhere. And to your point, either he is incredibly intelligent and naturally adept at this, or someone has been coaching and grooming him, because the first couple of things I noticed when he first started meeting with European and American diplomats, one of the first meetings I remember, it was the German foreign minister and a couple others flew to Damascus almost right away to meet with him. And I noticed he had on a suit, which is no small thing, right? We have leaders, you've got Zelensky in his combat sweatpants, you've got Trump in his red tie. Like, leaders present the image they want to present. He's very aware that the world's eyes were on him, and he clearly wanted to send a signal. I want to be a serious diplomat and I want to be part of this world. The other thing I've noticed is he receives female foreign ministers, but at least in public, he doesn't shake their hands. So that seems to be the line that he's willing to draw. But we've had people on this podcast, women who've spoken with him behind closed doors and said they felt very respected and he treated them like equals and were very impressed by him. But can you talk about kind of the dance he has to play between appealing to European and American leaders, playing this game so that he can get aid, so that he can get off, all these sanctions lists? I mean, the U.S. had to delist him personally from the terror list, but also Syria is a very multi-ethnic, multi-tribal, multi-religious nation. He's got to play to that at some point too, right? He's got to look legitimate to some of those factions as well. Is this a tightrope that's tenable?
Yeah, I think it's really tough when you get into that area, is how does he distinguish himself as being, tolerant, given his background towards all of these communities. And of course, the main problem of the Alawite sect, having been, the oppressive rulers of Syria for such a
The
long
privileged
time.
minority, yeah.
Yeah, because the Assad family were Alawites. And of course, there's been huge problems in some of the Alawite villages in Latakia already, whereby
Yes.
there's been fighting, there has been murder, and the Alawites have accused us, the new Syrian forces, of being sectional and not, as it were, respecting the ethnicity and their grouping and their representation. And of course, you've got many, many other groups, not the least being the Kurds up in the north, which are so important, or who are so important. So I think he's got a massive problem welding this group into a single country. And at the moment, I think the progress they're making is probably extremely slow. And I mean, some of the areas, my understanding, in Syria are still virtually self-governing with no central government authority really operating at all. But I guess over time they'll be trying to, as it were, create some sort of national unified identity under this guy who is a former extremist. But in a different context, with a different map and a different history, you can see a similar sort of development in the Irish Republic, with the emergence of Sinn Féin as one of the ruling political parties from having been directly associated with the provisional IRA. And of course, in South Africa, if you go way back to apartheid, the African National Congress, the ANC, certainly had a terrorist wing in the period of the struggle for independence, which was backed by the Soviets and by East Germany and by other communist states.
I did just look it up because I knew he went to university, but I couldn't remember what he studied. He studied media studies, which might explain a little bit why
Yeah.
he is quite so media savvy before enrolling in medicine for 2 years and then kind of disappearing to Iraq without telling his family. And that was when his stint with extremism started. And then he was captured by U.S. forces in 2006. The thing that I've found really striking is what Damascus looks like the day, the hours after Assad fell. Women with headscarves, women without headscarves, people playing traditional music, people playing rock music, kind of the plurality that had always made that such a vibrant and amazing city before these conflicts started, snapping back into place. And just we talk a lot in foreign affairs about migrants and immigrants, especially now. And the other startling image was the lines on the highway from Turkey, from other places, of people trying to go home, because people could go home for the first time in 10 years and they wanted to go home. That was really startling to me. And it has been so long since they had a country that they felt like they had a voice in and had a part of. They're so, so hopeful. I think they're realistic. And I think they're all a little cautious, but I hate to be Pollyanna, but I'm hoping just the exhaustion of war and the hope of something better can give him a little bit of a lift and maybe some help.
I think we're seeing that happening at the moment. And I think that the international support for the new regime in Syria is pretty encouraging. And okay, there have been some ghastly incidents and very violent incidents, particularly concerning the Alawites, but it seems that there's a sort of almost an agreement amongst the various ethnic communities to try to give it a go and build a new country. And it's interesting because quite a lot of Syrians I've read have been returning from areas of London and going back. And they are a really mercantile nation. They're traders, and they're keen to see the country get back on its feet. So in some respects, having Syria as a country with which the West can do business will make a big difference to stability in the Middle East if the experimentation works.
What does this mean for former Syrian proxies? I don't think this happens if Russia isn't mired down in Ukraine. Russian support was such an important part of Assad's regime. I don't think without Russia pulling back that this happens. And I wonder where Iran factors in. I mean, I remember when I was up on the border in the Bekaa Valley, Lebanon, kind of all these areas that bled across the borders. They had huge banners of Assad, and it was all Hezbollah and, Iran this, Iran that. Those are all down now. That's not taken down anymore. How does the relationship with Russia go? Is that toast? And what is new Syria's relationship to Iran?
Well, the Russian relationship, to my understanding, has pretty much been closed down. So they've taken their military out, and the naval base that they had, they've moved to the extent that one's available as an alternative to one of the two parts of Libya. So I think their remaining access to the Med or their remaining base on the Med is now effectively in the western part of Syria, if I've got my geography right, and that they pretty much closed completely. But the fact is that the whole paradigm in the Middle East has shifted because of the defeat by Israel of the axis of resistance. So the Iranians are certainly no longer going to be significant players in Syria. And I think that those sort of Shia elements that exist, particularly in Iraq, are very much asserting their identity as Iraqi Shia and not Iranian Shia. And the other thing, of course, which is crucially important, which hasn't received a lot of publicity, the Israelis have just been getting on and destroying the capability of what was the Syrian military. So the naval craft that the Syrian had, which were largely repurposed from Eastern Europe and Russia, have been sunk. The Air Force has been completely decimated, and a lot of the military equipment has been taken down. So what you've really got now as a ruling authority under the new regime is a sort of extended militia that doesn't have heavy equipment, doesn't have air cover, because the Israelis, I think, were determined to make sure that the new regime couldn't threaten it.
Yeah, that was not a popular decision, even among the Trump administration. To everything we're talking about, they're trying to support this new government, and it just weakens them immediately to bomb within the city that finally, the guns had finally stopped in Damascus, and then all of a sudden it's dropping from the sky.
But one of the reasons for, chaos in post-war Iraq was the lack of central authority. And you have to have a balance, between, let's say, a military in Syria that doesn't threaten regionally, but on the other hand can keep the peace amongst groupings that are in certain areas of the country are pretty conflicted.
No leader is perfect, but I think the people of that country deserve a chance. And I have a lot of Syrian friends, and I hope as we progress into the new year, they continue to get support and they are able to get their hands around this, because it's no small task.
Absolutely.
That's it for this week's One Decision in Brief. Of course, be sure to stay tuned for our regularly scheduled episode this Thursday. Leave us a comment, ask a question, send us some feedback, and of course, visit our website, onedecision.com, for a whole lot more content, as well as our YouTube page, where we've got shorts, explainers, interviews from conferences we've gone to, and a whole lot more. I'm Christina Ruffini. That other guy's Sir Richard Dearlove. Thanks so much for listening.